Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle, and welcome to Live with Raising a Reader. This is our inaugural conversation in our Radical Collaboration series. I couldn't be more excited to be here today with my wonderful friend and one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, Adeola Whitney. She's the CEO of Reading Partners. For over 20 years, Reading Partners has empowered students to succeed in school and beyond by engaging community volunteers to provide one-on-one tutoring. In the 2020-2021 school year, in addition to offering its traditional in-person one-on-one literacy tutoring, where it's safe to do so, Reading Partners is now offering a range of innovations, including a new online tutoring program called Reading Partners Connects, and I can't wait to hear more about that today. So there she is. Hi, Ola.
Hi, friend. Hi.
Thanks for being here today. It's so great to see you.
This really feels like this is your talk show. We should have matching. We should have matching mugs with
Yes.
Raising a Reader logo. Maybe like monogrammed. You have an M and I have an A. That's what this feels like. I just wish I could like actually touch you. Like I wish we were in the same room together. But virtual hug we'll have to do. Hi.
Virtual hug. And where are you joining us from today, Ola?
I am in the New York metropolitan area, specifically in Montclair, New Jersey, in my home in Montclair, New Jersey.
Oh, that's wonderful. How are you doing? How are you doing during this pandemic time?
I am doing my best to stay healthy. I'm good. I feel lucky that I'm healthy, that my family is healthy, that I have a job that I love, and that I have a ton of people that love and support me, including you, of course, and that I just have a great network and village around me. So I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well too. I couldn't be happier. I feel really lucky. Our communities are healthy. My team is healthy, and my family is as well. So I'm feeling pretty good here this February.
Good.
Well, I wanted to cover a few things today with you over the next 20 minutes or so. I know that our organizations are radical collaborators in several communities across the country, including the San Francisco Bay Area and Denver, Baltimore, even South Pasadena down in Los Angeles County. And man, over this past year, Raising a Reader we've had to pivot and innovate to meet the needs of what our communities need right now. And things look different. And I'm curious to hear how Reading Partners has innovated and changed due to the pandemic. What opportunities have you had to change?
Great question. So I think there are two big things that I think about in terms of how we've had to be agile, somewhat nimble, innovate, and really be patient with each other through the process. You know that I just came to Reading Partners only about 4 months ago. And so a few months before I came on board in the spring, the pandemic hit. And for organizations such as Reading Partners, where so much of the work that we do are with schools, or with school communities, we have, as you know really well, Michelle, brick and mortar reading centers in each of our schools. And when staff and schools, school leaders and students were no longer in school, we had to quickly pivot and adjust the way that we serve students and reimagine what that could look like. And so one of our incredible board members, Harris Larney, runs an e-therapy company. And he has an extraordinary platform and said, look, let's take your curriculum, let's put it on our platform. And so a number of my team members, including Dean Elson, Jen Joyce, and a slew of other incredible folks, including many of our leaders in the regions, worked really hard to adapt our curriculum to make it online. So as a result, we were able to continue to serve thousands of students, but it was hard. It was a challenge. There was a small little pilot we had to do in the summer. And then I would say another opportunity that we've had has really been being able to engage our families. So because our program happens during the day in a school setting, and the majority of our families are working when their students are when their children are in school. And so we didn't have the same access to our families as we do in a different way now. You know, so much of what's happening with bringing Reading Partners home through, an online device has allowed us to be able to see families and talk to them and text our families and engage and find additional ways that we can support them and supporting their students. And we just did not have that same capability. So I'd say those two things.
Wow. Well, I have a couple questions there. Well, first of all, an e-therapy app mashed up with reading partners, that's radical collaboration right there. Could you tell us a little bit about how that came to be and what inspired your board member to make such a significant contribution to the greater field and see their role in supporting the community?
Yeah, well, Harris had been on the board for a few years prior to that. And in the strategic plan that we worked on with Bridgespan back in 2018, again, I wasn't here during this time, but this is what I understand it to be. But in 2018, the thought at that time was, let's think about the impact that we want to have. And how can we think about impact not only in the direct regions, we're in 12 regions, as you know, across the country, not only in these regions, but also beyond, perhaps in rural communities. We're in South Carolina, we're directly in Charleston, but there are communities outside of Charleston that we want to serve, but we also find it hard to get our tutors and the volunteers we mobilize to get them physically there. And so I think the board had already been thinking about this for some time since the strategic plan. And I believe that part of the reason Harris came on board is because of the extraordinary work that he does and his company does to support kids all over the country. I think I heard him say to me yesterday that they work with over 400 schools, but in addition to schools, they have other partners. And so he is used to what this virtual support looks like for children and for families. And so I think he already came with that, with that innovation. And so it's kind of mirroring the vision that he had created for this successful e-therapy company and platform to kind of mesh that with the 20 years of success we've seen with supporting students to be able to read in the curriculum that's always been kind of not paper to pencil, but it's, as you know, like a packet of information, not something online. Yeah. So I guess it was, part of why he joined was that he saw this opportunity. And then in the strategic plan, we iterated or not iterated, rather kind of asserted that this was the direction we wanted to go.
That's so neat. What could be seen as an unlikely partner coming in and playing such a significant role, and just the potential for that the online tutoring program to scale and serve kids beyond your current communities that you're working in. That's really exciting. So what we didn't share with the listeners and the viewers is that I used to work at Reading Partners. So Ola and I worked together, and I know the model quite well. I love the organization. They do tremendous work and great synergies between what we do at Raising a Reader with younger children and engaging families, handing off to Reading Partners and helping kids learn how to read. And they're amazing at engaging volunteers. One of the best in the country, I'd say, 14,000 volunteers or so engaged. And now with this new online resource, being able to pull in probably even more volunteers. Is that true? Have you seen a change in your volunteerism at all, Ola?
Well, we've definitely seen an increase of interest, but because of the pandemic, the number of students we're serving this year are less than we're used to serving. So, we didn't get to do a full-scale, robust pilot of our program, of the online Reading Partners Connects. We did not get to do that prior to launching it. I mean, we did little small subsets, 100 and 100 or 150 students, but just as we were creating this, educators were trying to figure out how they learn to teach students in a digital and a remote way. I mean, so I think it was a lot of learning all around. And so therefore, the launch of our program in some districts, we weren't up and running until late in the fall. And as you know, typically we're starting to serve students in September. So just that runway actually didn't enable us in the same way that we would have hoped, at least this year, for our first year, to be able to serve the number of students and also be able to attract as many volunteers. But that is the hope. I think that is the vision when we set out to kind of ink the strategic plan back in 2018. That was absolutely what we're thinking. That's what we were thinking back then. And I think that's our hope and how we move forward next year and in years to come.
Ola, I'm curious about self-care. It's kind of been, I'm on the West Coast and we talk a lot about self-care in our yoga, and sometimes there's some stigmas around that. But in this past year, I think it's gotten center stage in realizing how important self-care is to our families, especially our families of color who are facing, more likelihood of being contracting the virus.
Right.
A higher unemployment rates, just a lot of more, there's a lot more tax going on our families in general. And I'm curious how Reading Partners has thought about self-care for your communities, for your kids, for your families, for your educators. Any tips that you have for our listeners about self-care?
Yeah, that is such a great question. We didn't roll out a specific program or 10 different ways that we would support our families, or I'm sorry, our educators specifically with self-care, but self-care is extraordinarily important to Reading Partners. So one of the things that we've done is we ran self-wellness workshops throughout the fall. I don't remember which months. It may have started in October. I came on board at the end of October, and I think it started even earlier than that. And I believe must have run through November. So that's something that we did internally. But in terms of, the way that we promoted, I think just within our program. So first and foremost, we recognize the importance of social emotional learning for kids. And that in learning literacy, learning to read is nothing if we're not thinking about the confidence, the resilience, the persistence that our amazing students have, and really how we celebrate that and how we support them, how we build their confidence, and think about already all of the great assets that they bring to the table when they're perhaps maybe struggling to read. So that's how we train and think about supporting our tutors. That's how we model for them, even in orientation. And then, we believe our work we are not at all the panacea in supporting children's learning and supporting children how to read. They have families, they're educators in the schools, they're teachers in the school communities that are already pouring so much into them. We are only an additional support to what the school community and their families and their communities are already doing. And so I think, part of the way that we think about how we can support them is the pivot that we've made to this online platform to ultimately make it easier for them to do all of the work that they're doing throughout the school day, keeping them posted on how how we're supporting their kids, finding out ways that we can support them. In one of our regions in Tulsa, they've worked with the district to think about, I think there's something, I don't remember the name. I'm going to get it wrong. So I'd rather not say it because wrong. But I was speaking with the ED there a few weeks ago, and he shared ways that they are supporting social and emotional learning and connection of students within the district, and how AmeriCorps members and staff have also partnered with the district to do that. I'm trying to think of other things. I think, also just realizing where students are when they enter the Zoom room, and being able to ask them how they are and really mean it, and being able to engage with them and sharing with them how proud we are of them. I think those are the ways, but I wish, and maybe this wasn't your question, but I wish these are the 5 things that we've done to really help promote self-care with the school partners. I mean, I just think I recognize that everybody needs it right now.
Right.
I'm a parent. I know you are too, not just as parents, not just as humans, also educators. And I said it earlier, just the fact that as kids were learning to learn remote in this environment, so were teachers.
Right.
They're used to being in front of kids. I mean, I think of my first grader, and his teacher is used to being on a rug, being able to see all of her kids at lunch, being able to reach out and give high fives, and just not doing that and actually meeting them virtually is tough.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We talk a lot about that at our house. I have a 4th grader. And when I hear Lily talk about how difficult it is in her Zoom room from her teacher, I say, we talk a lot about empathy and how hard it is for her teacher as well. I said, it's just as hard for your teacher, honey, right now it is for you to sit through the class. He wants to be in person with you. He wants to be engaging with you. So it's also, empathy has had this moment for sure during this pandemic time.
Absolutely. And I think I love that. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And if we're not, as adults, and as service providers, your team at Raising a Reader and my team at Reading Partners, if we're not meeting our partners where they're at,
right,
if we're not extending ourselves and demonstrating levels of empathy and sharing that we recognize that everybody is doing the best that they can.
That's right.
I think we've done it in those ways. But yeah, that's such a great reminder. You brought up. It's so good.
Good. Well, I want to be sure to talk about Black History Month. We're at the end of February already, and we're wrapping up Black History Month. It certainly felt different to me this year than in the times past. I've seen I think my linen company, I got lots of emails about Black History Month that maybe folks who maybe hadn't celebrated in the past, but due to the death of George Floyd, or the killing of George Floyd, and the racial reckoning, and the spotlight on the Black Lives Matter movement, what has been going on for years, feels a little different this year. And I wanted to ask you what Reading Partners, how does it feel for you, and what is Reading Partners doing to celebrate? And I really want to put a pinpoint on how can our educators of kids and supporters of families celebrate and amplify Black families every day, and not just in Black History Month.
Yes.
Or just in February.
So I love all of that. I think first and foremost, a big part of the reason I took this job to lead this incredible organization was partly because of the incidents that we all saw on our phones, on our computer screens, and on our television screens. It was the first moment in a really long time where, as a country, we were all still. Mm-hmm. We weren't commuting back and forth to work. We weren't, whether it be public transportation or driving, we weren't going and picking up our kids. We were all still. Everyone was home. So I think that's the difference. The incidents, and unfortunately, all of the unfortunate deaths that have occurred, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Elijah McClain, and countless others, were all happening. Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, all of those happened way before the pandemic.
That's right.
I think the difference is that we were still as a country, and I think our attention was brought to things. I mean, I am happy to know the number of people in this country that now understand what Juneteenth is and are interested in celebrating it, where, prior to this year, prior to the pandemic, people didn't know what that was. So to go and answer your question, first and foremost, a big part of the reason I took the job is because I fundamentally believe that people who look like me need to be in leadership positions, need to be at the helm of organizations, helping to ultimately support Black and brown children. 90% of the kids that get tutored through Reading Partners are Black and brown. And so I think that is important. Like, voices like mine need to be elevated. And that creates more voices like mine when people see themselves in people who look like me and Black women. So that's one. And I just felt like the time is now. As you know, I've had a history in nonprofit leadership for a long time. I've wanted to be a CEO for a long time. And your encouragement, conversations you and I have had over dinner and over Zoom and over FaceTime, and seeing you and someone I admire so much. I mean, I think it was all of that. It was my village, and it was also the racial reckoning. So there's that racial reckoning, rather. And then in terms of what we've done as an organization, similar to, I know, a lot of the work that Raising a Reader has done, we are really placing an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion, race, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or READY, as we call it at Reading Partners. That happened before I came on board. That was one of the reasons I was really attracted to wanting to come back. And so we have an incredible READY team, READY committee, including my chief of staff, Marti Tesfaye. She and many other leaders throughout the organization had been working to think about what is our role as an organization, what's our responsibility as an organization to really live into what it means to be an organization focused on educational equity, and not just saying it, and not just it being somewhat performative as something that's on our website, which unfortunately a lot of companies and nonprofit organizations have done. But what does it mean in our action? And so prior to when I came on, in celebration of Hispanic or Latinx Heritage Month, there were a slew of things that the organization was doing, led by an incredible Latinx affinity group, focused on speakers and authors and just ways to engage. And so the Black History Month was really followed suit of work that the organization was already doing. So what we did was essentially essentially every week we had a variety of different events that folks could opt into, or rather like one event that people could opt into. And it was incredible to see like a third of our organization all coming to these optional events. And so we started something called a leadership story series within our organization. I started that when I came on board back in October, where I first kind of modeled what a leadership story is. And we essentially gave it a DEI spin to focus on like, how have you experienced race, how have race, equity, diversity, and inclusion played a role in your leadership story, played a role in your career, played a role in who you are personally and your upbringing. And so we've given these set of questions. So we essentially took that model and brought it to Black History Month and featured 4 absolutely incredible leaders within my organization. And so I'm honored to call them colleagues. I was crying, as many people were, by the end of their story. So that was like our second week. We also talked a lot about Black not being a monolith. And so everyone Black is not the same. We do not have similar experiences. The diaspora is real. And so in one of our regions in Seattle, a large percentage of the children of color, just the children in general that we serve there, are of African descent and are immigrants, where many of their families came from a number of different countries in Africa. And so the incredible AmeriCorps team and staff said, look, there's a lot that we need to do to educate ourselves. And so they created, so they shared this with some members of the Ready team, and Marty Tesfaye, our chief of staff, said, hey, can you actually share this with the rest of the organization? So that was our first week. We participated in this great workshop. And then we've also, we led a panel with Black executives in the nonprofit world, where some incredible leaders that I've just been fortunate enough to work with, and then others that many of my other colleagues have also worked with.
Wow.
Together. So it's been pretty robust. And then this week we have a poetry slam. And so we have a number of spoken word artists who are also AmeriCorps members and staff. So they're going to be reading some original work. And then we also just have people sharing some of their favorite Black poems and Black poets. So yeah, that took me a long time to answer, but that's some of the work that we've been doing. And maybe just the last thing that I'll say in the last part of the question you asked is similar to me as a CEO and other incredible Black leaders. I know Ali Knight, who runs Fly, based in the Bay Area, and many other leaders of color. I think it's important. Representation matters. It matters in leadership. It matters in the books that we read.
That's right.
Black history is American history, right? So it's not like learn Black history because you'll be more woke or you'll be more culturally attuned. True and true. But more than that, you'll really understand the richness that makes up our country's history. It is so much more than what so many of us were taught in school. And in order for us to disrupt that, there's self-education that we must do. And so that is really how we have thought about how we introduce books to our students, and it really elevating books that have Black authors and or Black illustrators, because that's important. I mean, that's important for children to see, all children, not only for their representation, but also for young children who are white or non-Black and non-brown, to also open their minds to see what's possible of people who may look different than them. Yeah. And so I think in that way, it's equally important.
I love that. And what I think a lot of people may not know is, I know we wanted to have a deeper conversation about representation, but we're running a little bit out of time. But what I don't know that people know is the study that came out by the Cooperative Children's Book Center. They're out of the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They published some pretty interesting statistics that I would be remiss if we didn't share here today, is that we really have a significant diversity gap in publishing. And one thing that stands out to me the most is that about only 10% of all the books that are published in this particular year, children's books, were about Black or African American children. And of those books that were published, only 29% of those books were written or illustrated by Black authors.
Yes.
And that matters. And we at Raising a Reader are taking a look at, and we're just about wrapping up our book audit of our collection to look at our 3,500 books that everyone knows and loves, and I, salivate over. But looking at the authorship of representation matters, yes, and also authors' own voices and lived experience within those stories matters as well. So I wonder, just in closing, if you had a book or an author that you would promote or recommend to our listeners that should be in every home across the country.
I have tons of them,
I know,
but to narrow down to one, I would probably say there's a book about Ida B. Wells called Ida B. Wells, Let the Truth Be Told. It's by Walter Dean Myers, Black man, born and raised in this country. It's a beautiful book. And I'm using that one. I was going to say one that I think more people know, like about, written by Barack Obama, but I think a lot of people already know that book. So I wanted to maybe share one that many people don't. And on our website, we actually have a list of books throughout the year. We've curated a book list.
I wanted to share one too.
By illustrators. I'm sorry. Say that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So we can check that out on your website. I wanted to share one too for our older readers. We have a number of storybooks, but my stepdaughter loves to read. She's conquering her first almost 900-page book right now, which we're so excited about. She's reading at a 6th grade level. She also loves graphic novels. And so I've been looking for graphic novels that are written by and illustrated by Black authors. And one series that we love is called Akesi. I don't know if you knew about this one, but the author, Marguerite About, she is from Cote d'Ivoire. And so it's a really great, I didn't know if your kids might be interested in this one too, but we love it at our house.
Well, I have a son who also loves graphic novels. So after this, you will have to show me that book again or text me a picture. I love it. I have not heard of that. I was like nodding my head because I was excited, not because I knew. So yes, I would love that. Yeah.
Just to change it up. Sometimes, we love kids to decide what it is they want to read. And we know that keeps them inspired in their journey of reading. Yes. Well, Ola, thank you for being here with us today. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us with our first ever live. Ola and I could talk for hours on end, as we have many, many times. So I couldn't be more thrilled to have you here. Where can people find out more about Reading Partners?
On our website, also social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Reading Partners has all of that. And then, of course, the website that's coming up on the screen.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Ola, hugs to you. Can't wait to hug you,
Michelle.
Love you.
Amazing.
Bye.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.